give people 1 minute while everyone come into the seminar, the webinar, I should say. Um, Hi, Brian. How are you doing today? I hope everyone has been well. All right, so we're going to get started and I'm going to introduce our speaker today. So good afternoon and welcome to the final week of the Help New England Where Your Help Matter webinar series. My name is Vivian Williams and I'm a manager of care management here at Help New England. And we are looking forward to talking to you today about burnout from chronic workplace stress, no matter where you are physically working. The amount and feelings of stress have only increased over time, especially in the last 18 months when unexpected circumstances arose. We aim to improve the health and lives of people in our communities, and Help New England wants to empower you all to stay well during this positive and challenging times in life. All webinars in this series are recorded and can be found on our Help New England YouTube page shortly after the live presentation. You will receive a follow-up email with the YouTube link and the survey link. We will also post the survey link in the chat at the end of today's presentation. Your feedback is very important to us and we appreciate it. It's a pleasure today to introduce today's presenter, Chris Vassiliadis. She's a speaker, author, and owner of Priority Wellness. Chris specializes in helping overwhelmed and overbusy professionals to elevate their focus and vitality. After being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, Chris decided to get trained and certified as a health coach and founded Priority Wellness in 2008. She has been relapse-free for over 14 years. She is currently certified by the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. If you have a question today and you would like to an answer, please enter that in the Q&A, not the chat. You are also able to ask a question anonymously if you prefer. We hope you enjoy today's webinar. Please help me welcome Chris Vassiliadis.
So much, Vivian. I am thrilled to be here today to discuss this really important topic and a topic that's close to my heart. Let me just advance the slides here. So this is called Busting Workplace Burnout, and thank you all for joining me today, whether you are joining live or listening to the recording. The intention by the time we are done with this webinar is to prevent you looking like this really charred match. My plan is to give you a few things. You'll have a definition of what burnout is. You will know what the symptoms of burnout are. And then you'll get some very practical, actionable ways to prevent burnout, whether you are a leader in your workplace or an employee in your workplace. And I invite you to take notes as you go. As Vivian said, this is going to be recorded, so you might not necessarily take notes on the definition or the symptoms because you can replay that at any time. What I would invite you to do is, as I share different ideas for what leaders and employees can do to prevent burnout, the ideas that resonate for you, jot those down. So by the time we're done, you'll have an action sheet of steps that you can take to prevent burnout in your situation. And what I'll share are a combination of ways of doing, things that you can do, as well as ways of being, ways to carry yourself, ways to lead yourself. So with that, let's go ahead and proceed. And we have a very brief poll that we'd like folks who are on the session live to answer. And just curious to see who we have on the call. We're now recording this 19 months into the pandemic. So I'm curious whether folks are 100% working from home, whether you're in a hybrid situation or currently working 100% in the corporate office. And let's see, we've got about 71% of people answering at this point. Okay, we've got about 80% of people responding at this point. Wow, interesting. So we've got with 80% of people responding, we've got 67% of people 100% working from home, 26% hybrid, and 26% working in the corporate office. So very interesting. And that helps to give me a context of what folks are for when the Q&A comes in. So thank you very much for responding to that poll. So let's dive into the material here. Let's start with what burnout is and what it's not. So the first definition I'll give you is this, consider this a three-part definition. The first part is it's a syndrome of being depleted emotionally, physically, and cognitively. Basically, you feel completely wrung out, or you feel like your fuel tank is near or close to empty most of the time. The second part is feelings of cynicism or depersonalization. So what that might look like is making sarcastic or snide comments, maybe feeling a sense of bitterness, and on the depersonalization side, feeling emotionally disconnected from the people around you. The third part is feeling ineffective and incompetent at your job, at your normal daily activities that you previously felt pretty confident about. Some folks feel like this is a continuum. In other words, it starts with being depleted in these ways. If that hangs around for a long enough time, it leads to the cynicism and depersonalization, and then that ultimately leads to the ineffectiveness and incompetence. Other folks feel like you can enter burnout from any one of these pieces. So consider all those options. Here's another definition from the World Health Organization, and they recognized burnout a few years back as an occupational phenomenon brought on by chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. So that's another way you can frame burnout. Ultimately, it's feeling like you don't have the resources to meet your demands. You've lost the capacity to meet the demands of your personal and professional life. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you hate your job. I get this question once in a while. And so one doesn't necessarily translate into the other. Now, if burnout hangs around long enough, it might result in you disliking your job, but it doesn't mean you hate your job. In fact, a lot of top performers who can be really engaged in their work can burn out while they're still loving their work. Burnout is also separate and distinct from the clinical and medical conditions of depression and anxiety. So they're three separate things, but again, if you have burnout intense enough or long enough, it can lead to these medical conditions. Again, burnout is a syndrome, it's not a medical condition. What does burnout look like? How can you spot it in yourself, or if you're a leader, or in your employees? And these symptoms, as I share them, you might have experienced these kind of in a one-off situation. You might have a day where you feel off. Consider whether these are existing over a period of time, over a matter of days and weeks, weeks and months. So you might be feeling exhausted or depleted, as I mentioned earlier. You might be forgetting a piece of information someone told you. You might miss an appointment or a deadline. You might forget where you put your keys, but you have this pattern of being forgetful. You might get into a pattern of feeling distracted. It's hard for you to concentrate. You feel like it's hard for you to focus, and you almost welcome distractions to take you away from your day-to-day stuff. You might feel like you're always running on autopilot. You're kind of in this rote way of working. You're addicted to being busy. Basically, the classic definition of workaholism. You might have insomnia. Might have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep. You might wake up in the middle of the night and have trouble falling back asleep. You might have a loss of appetite. Food's just not appealing. You're not stopping to have meals. And everything that goes with that. Again, you might have feelings of feeling anxious and feelings of being depressed. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean you have the medical condition of anxiety or depression. However, if you find yourself getting to a place where you feel hopeless, where you want to harm yourself, that requires immediate attention. and would be outside the realm of burnout. And you might be prone to anger or irritation. You have more of a short fuse. Things set you off a lot quickly than before, and you might have less patience. And finally, you are mentally distancing yourself or checking out. Any one of these symptoms can be an indicator of burnout. And just imagine if you are experiencing these symptoms on an ongoing basis, how that impacts your productivity and performance and overall well-being. It's going to impact it in a negative way. So this is very relevant to being able to function well in the work setting. So there's a lot of myths out there about, well, who causes burnout? It's because people, aren't managing themselves well. Well, that might be a slice of it, but a large part of it is how things, what's the environment like in a work organization? What's the leadership like, and what's the culture like? Top reasons for burnout in a work setting include unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workload, lack of role clarity, lack of communication and support from someone's manager, unreasonable time pressure. So think about what's being modeled, rewarded, and communicated directly or indirectly in your workplace. Is it safe for folks to raise their hand for help? Do people have autonomy in conducting their work? Are they trusted to get the job done that they were hired to do? And again, watch out for those top performers. People can be engaged in their work and burnt out at the same time. So how can we start to make sure as leaders that we're enabling well-being instead of stifling it in the environment that we're creating? And then what can we as employees do to self-manage ourselves and architect our days so we can flourish? So I'm going to cover that in a couple of different pieces. I'll give you some ideas for leaders first. We'll stop for some brief questions, and then we'll move on to ideas for employees. So on the ideas for leaders that you can do to help prevent burnout in your workspace, first consider how you can model and reward well-being and the wholeness of life, basically acknowledging that work is just one slice of folks' life and there's a whole other part of their lives that exists. So what might modeling look like? It might look like, especially if you have folks who are working largely remote, maybe you sign on at the end of the day at a reasonable hour, 5 or 6 p.m. and say, excuse me, as you're signing off, say, hey, I'm calling it a day, folks, have a good night. So you're demonstrating like, okay, you're ending the workday at a relatively reasonable hour. Or maybe you mention, hey, I had a great walking meeting with so-and-so the other day. Or that you're not, when people try to book a meeting with you during lunchtime, you know what, I'm going to actually eat my lunch away from my desk at lunchtime. So those are some ways to model well-being. And then consider rewarding well-being when you see it demonstrated by your employees. Maybe someone takes on a walking challenge or a water drinking challenge or a power walking challenge, whatever it might be, step challenge. Or people start sharing recipes. You start hearing about you start talking about what people did over the weekend or after work. How are their kids doing in football, for example? Whatever it is, but make that part of the natural part of discussion. It might be a side discussion in some of your meetings that you're acknowledging that there are other parts of their life that contribute to their well-being, and reward it and acknowledge it when you see other employees demonstrating their well-being and they're paying attention to that. The second idea, and this is kind of bundled together, is to communicate, notice, ask, and support. So what do I mean by this? First of all, communicate and share what burnout is. Acknowledge it that this is a real thing and you're working really hard to help people avoid that. Share the symptoms of burnout, and then start to notice if you see those symptoms in your employees. And when you do, ask about it. Say, hey, I'm starting to see this pattern of you feeling, you forgetting some things. Is everything okay? I just want to check in. And not only ask for that when you notice symptoms, but also proactively ask for feedback. If people have ideas for ways to do things more simply, more efficiently. And so ask for feedback if things could be done better and be open to that. give support to folks. If folks say, you know what, I am struggling with this, I would love some support in that area. So find out what support they need, brainstorm possible solutions, refer them to, if you have an employee assistance program, refer them to a counselor if that's something that would be helpful. Ask how you can support them. And when if they identify a symptom of burnout that they're experiencing, ask what they feel is causing that, and that you can start get to the root of where you can start to help them. Be discerning with meetings and messaging. So there's a bunch of different ways you can approach this. I know some companies have declared certain days are meeting-free days. Pick a certain day of the week. It might be Friday, it might be Monday, what have you. So consider whether you might declare a certain day a meeting-free day, number one. Number two, ask yourself when you're thinking about having a meeting, does this really merit a meeting? Or could it be done, is it an email? Is it simply sharing information? Is it a phone call? Does everyone that you're inviting to the meeting really need to be there, or do they just need to know the outcome of the meeting and perhaps just need the meeting notes or the decisions made? And can you be discerning with the meeting time? A lot of people are experiencing Zoom fatigue from having meetings back to back to back to back. So instead of, for example, having 30-minute or 60-minute meetings, consider having 20 or 25-minute meetings and 45 or 50-minute meetings. That buys people some time so they're not running into meetings hot. You're giving them some breathing room in between meetings. Not that you shove more things in, but just people have a chance to regroup and reset. So those are some ideas on being discerning with meetings. Being discerning with messaging, again, really be conscious of the behaviors that you're demonstrating. Are you sending emails in the middle of the night to people? Or do you have some policies at work where we only expect people to read and respond to an email between, say, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We don't expect you to read and respond to email outside working hours, and make sure that is demonstrated. Use the subject line of your email in a way that makes it easy for people to process emails. You might put an FYI or action required, or for your information, and anything to help people direct and process that a lot more quickly. And again, does it really need to be done in email, or is it a quick phone call? So again, be really selective on when you use messaging and what you use it for. Positively impact others' energy. I'm a firm believer that leaders effectively model possibility and being able to bring positive energy to a situation, whether it's a particular one-on-one meeting, whether it is an in-person meeting, whether it is in Zoom. Really pause and think about the energy that you're bringing into the room. And is it uplifting the energy of the other folks, or is it diminishing their information? Is it pulling the energy down? So really be conscious of the energy that you're bringing to everybody else. I hope this goes without saying on a topic of avoiding burnout, but avoid overloading people. And make it clear that if you're giving someone an assignment and you're saying this now takes the top priority, be open to feedback. Be open and ask, if this is pushing you over the edge, let me know. We will work together and figure out what the new priorities are, whether something needs to slide or get dropped off or get delegated. So you're creating kind of a two-way discussion around, I'm making this a top priority for you. Let me know if this is overloading you, and we can figure out ways to reorganize what's on your plate. And then be curious and flexible regarding people's work preferences. Don't make assumptions or generalize. If your company is one that's giving people the option to work from home or work hybrid or work in the corporate office, be curious when people raise their hand about certain reasons why they want that, and be flexible in terms of when they get work, when and where they get work done. Emphasize outputs versus how they're performing their work. That's the big thing to make sure to focus on, and trust that they will be able to get the job done. So here I'll pause and see if we have any questions that would like to be answered at this time before we move on to ideas for employees.
Chris, one question here. So you have your 6 ideas here. If this is brand new to a leader, it probably wouldn't be brand new to a leader, but if this is something they're just starting to implement, what do you think is the most important or the first one to tackle?
Ooh, it would be a tie for me between 1 and 2. Just really stop and be aware of what you're modeling as a leader in terms of you demonstrating that you're addressing well-being, but also the communicate piece. Communicate, burnout is a real thing, and I'm concerned about making sure that that I don't create an environment that contributes to that. And I want to help you prevent that. Here's what it is, here's the symptoms, and say, I'm going to start noticing it, but I'd like you to kind of police it for yourself and notice what's going on for you. So yeah, I'd say it's a tie between 1 and 2.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was our only question.
All right, then let's move on. Here, I'm going to give you 3 ideas for employees, and it's technically going to be 9 because I'm going to give you 3 different slides, but then each of those slides breaks down into 3 other pieces, sub-pieces. And if you're a leader, you're also an employee, so these ideas will apply to you as well. First, it's to create what I call a flourishing personal environment. So what do I mean by that? No matter where you're working, if you're working from home or if you're working in the corporate office, you can architect how you create the environment in which you work. So the first step in that is to deliberately bookend your days to power up and wind down. If you've been working 100% from home since the pandemic started and you previously commuted, you lost some transition time because commute time was kind of our built-in way to separate our work from the rest of our life. So without that, if you're working from home 100% of the time, we've lost those lines of demarcation. So especially for that reason, it's helpful to bookend your day in ways that you can power up in a way that enables you to take on the day and wind down in a way that allows you to release and discharge the day. So start thinking about what helps you, if you have this in kind of your morning routine at the beginning of the day, what helps you, if that's part of your routine, feels like, yeah, I'm ready to take on the day no matter what happens. So what might that look like? That could be a healthy breakfast. It might be stretches. It might be doing some other form of movement, going for a walk. You might read something inspirational. It could be journaling, prayer, meditation, any one of those things. And this could take you 5 minutes. It could take you a half hour or more. So play and experiment with what you know. Yeah, this is routinely part of my morning. This helps me feel ready to take on the day. So that's one bookend. And then the other part is what helps you wind down effectively? What helps you discharge and release your workday? It might be sitting in silence. It might be going for a walk. It might be playing some soothing music. It might be changing out of your clothes. And even if you wore sweats all day, changing into another pair of sweats or your pajamas, kind of signaling to your body, okay, we are transitioning from one part of our life to another part of our life. What helps you, and if you live with other folks, it can help to think about, okay, what helps me release the day so I can be at my best for the other people in my life right now and for myself. So think of ways that help you, and you might jot down some ideas of what helps you power up effectively and wind down and release the day effectively. And then use boundaries for your top priorities and well-being. So one thing you might also do as part of your power up routine is to consider, okay, what's the most important thing? If I get nothing else done today, what's the most important thing I need to accomplish today or want to accomplish today? And almost even visualize what that would look like to make that happen and create a boundary around that. I'm a huge fan of doing that in chunks. Block a 60 to 90-minute chunk for that most important thing. If you're a morning person, do that first thing in the morning. If you're an evening person, do it later in the day. But block that out and create a boundary around it. What might that look like? If it's a certain work task, assuming it's a certain work task, only have the applications and windows open on your computer, that you need to perform the task. No messaging open, no other kind of notifications open. Your notifications, phone and such are shut off. You're not taking phone calls or responding to text at that time. Anything on your desk, it's only relevant to the task you're performing at hand. If you have others around you, let them know that you are not to be disturbed. You're basically doing the equivalent of putting your phone on do not disturb mode. And especially if you're working from home, tell people, do not interrupt me unless someone's bleeding. Whatever you have to say to let people know this is your focus time. So be sure to create a boundary for that, and create a boundary for your well-being. As you think about, and we'll talk about this more in the next slide, ways that you can fuel yourself and have you be well during the day. What's some ways to kind of weave that into your day? And one simple way is stopping and having lunch, and ideally having that away from your desk. Have that at a dining table, a place that's designed to eat at. So, and if you work in your dining room, maybe sit in a different seat. So you're telling your body, this is where we sit to have lunch. This is where I sit to have work, for example, and create a boundary around that. So, okay, we have bookends, we have boundaries. And then this final thing, you can think of this as breaks. So bookends, boundaries, and breaks. Grant yourself space to reset your pace. If I were to ask you to open up your calendar now, how much white space would you have? Or are things shoved in back to back to back to back? We need breathing room. It's not being lazy. It's not being a weakling to need breaks throughout the day. Our brain needs them to function better. Think of the ideas that come to you when you're in the shower. Why does that happen? Because your mind has been allowed to wander. And so we need to give ourselves that white space during the day. That's still time. That's being time. That allows you to reset your pace. That's where innovation comes from. That's where solutions come from. So make sure you give yourself space to reset your pace during the day. And this might be a minute, it might be 10, 15 minutes or longer if you're stopping to have a meal. So if you only have a quick amount of time, one quick way to reset your pace is to do what's called taking a panoramic view. This gives you a neurological reset. So if you're in your office, wherever you work, and you can't take a break to get outside, you can just stop, look above your computer, and just kind of turn your head from side to side and take a panoramic view. That helps to neurologically reset your brain. Ideally, if you can get outside, do the same thing, but now you're looking outside, you're looking towards the horizon, and you're kind of turning your head from side to side and looking back and forth. And that helps to reset your brain. So that can be a really quick way to help yourself do that. Other ways are, and I'm a huge fan of taking a break every 60 to 90 minutes. You set your phone's alarm if you need to do this. And so again, if you can only do something quick, step out of your chair, do a couple of squats, do some wall push-ups, do some stretches. That can be some quick ways to reset your pace. Look out the window if you have a window nearby. Get up and get a glass of water. Walk up and down a flight of stairs. Go outside and get some outdoor air, outdoor vitamin D from the sun. So there are a variety of ways you can reset your pace and maybe play with that. You might just sit quietly. You might take a nap. There's countless different ways to reset your pace. So use that. I challenge you to integrate some white space in your day, play with taking breaks every 60 to 90 minutes, use that panoramic view and see how that works for you. And the upshot of this slide is to use this as a way to start to help you flourish by incorporating the bookends, boundaries, and breaks. Step number 2 is to remember your humanness. We are human beings, not human doings, and we are not robots. So when we start to remember our humanness, that can help us in our self-management of preventing burnout. What does this start to look like? So first, it's recognizing and identifying what fuels you and what drains you, what gives you energy and what drains your energy. You can think of this a couple of different ways. First of all, consider, what are your natural rhythms during the day? Where are you naturally high, naturally low? What are the ebbs and flows like? And if you don't know, that might be something to record for a week or so. Notice when things are high and things are low naturally for you. And then work your work tasks around that. When you need to do focused cerebral work, do that when you are most on. And when you need to do more administrative things, read and respond to email, read and respond to phone calls, do that at a lower point of the day, or maybe perhaps you take the breaks at lower points of your day, for example. So that's one thing, first of all, tuning into your natural rhythms. Secondly, is to consider energy broken down into 4 buckets: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And what generates energy for you in those buckets and what drains your energy. And if you'd like to, I invite you to take on a kind of after this assignment, which is to grab a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. So you'll have 2 columns. Label the first column energy infusers and label the second column energy drains. And consider the top priorities on your plate and jot down all the things that generate good energy for you that could help you in achieving, staying most on and preserving your well-being as you achieve your top priorities or work towards your top priorities. And then brainstorm the things that drain you the most. We'll talk about dealing with the drains in a moment, but at least now you have on a piece of paper what gives you energy and what drains your energy. And now you can use the bookends, breaks, and boundaries to fold those in, integrate them into your day. Don't wait for a vacation. Don't wait for a weekend to recoup. Definitely look at ways to weave them into your day. Oops. Okay. And the next bullet here is to be kind to yourself and be present. Often when we're stressed, we can be very punitive in our language, and we can be really hard on ourselves in how we talk about ourselves. We can say, oh, I should have done this. Oh, I shouldn't have missed that. Or calling ourselves lazy or slow or stupid, what have you. And first of all, we shouldn't should all over ourselves. And if you find yourself doing that or find yourself tempted to talk to yourself in a punitive way, that's a trigger to kind of stop and say, hold on a second. Let me be kind to myself. Let me give myself some self-compassion and treat myself as I would my best friend in the same situation. Or consider how you would treat a small child who's having a tough time. We don't wag our finger at them and say, oh, you should have figured this out, or oh, you should have done this better. No, we give them empowering, uplifting language. So use that sort of language with ourselves, number 1. Number 2 is to be present. Often when we're stressed, we can get caught in the cycle of wishing things were different, wishing things were the way they were before this particular situation happened, or getting in a state of worry or what ifs about the future. And we can't create any solutions if we're pining away for the past or worrying, doing all the what ifs about the future. The only way we can solve things is being present and be in the present moment. I love the definition of mindfulness from Jon Kabat-Zinn. And if you don't know who he is a major thought leader in the area of mindfulness. And he defines mindfulness as the awareness of paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So we can practice mindfulness basically as an everyday thing in any situation. You can be mindful in the next conversation that you have with someone. You can be mindful when you're performing your next work task. You can be mindful when you're hand washing the dishes. So you can, if you're interested, you can take that on as kind of a lifetime experiment because we're never done practicing mindfulness. So play with ways to be mindful and do things one at a time, monotask instead of multitask. Recent research came out showing that only 2.5% of us can successfully multitask. So chances are you can't do it. The majority of folks cannot do it. Additional research has shown it causes us more stress. Multitasking causes us more stress. We make more mistakes and the tasks take longer. So there's a lot of reasons to monotask instead of multitask and to be mindful and present. And then finally, in remembering your humanness, remember the relationships that you have and cultivate those. As humans, we are wired to connect. So there's no reason why we need to do anything alone. So if you find yourself struggling, leverage the relationships in your life, both personally and professionally, whether that's with your manager, whether that's with peers at work, whether it's with HR, whether it's with friends or family outside of work, and resources that are available to you, whether it's your employee assistance program at work, whether if you are spiritually inclined, there's an infinite supply of resources available. So there's all different things that you can have available to you. And again, just a reminder that you don't need to do it alone. So if this particular step speaks to you, jot down the ideas that you want to look at experimenting with and implementing with. And then finally, step 3 is to plan to respond well to stressors. This is basically being proactive in how you respond to the stressors in your life. It starts with anticipating your stress triggers and how to wisely cope. This could be another question that you ask yourself in your wind-up routine for the day. What could set me off? What could take me off balance today? And think about, okay, well, how do I want to deal with that situation? What's a way that could give me peace? Another way to apply this principle is, remember in step 2, I invited you to create a list of things that give you energy and things that drain your energy. Whether those are energy drains, those could be stress triggers as well, the things that drain your energy. So a way to deal with those stress triggers, I came up with a mnemonic that I call the 3R rescue. So you could go through each of your drains or triggers that you identified one at a time and ask yourself, okay, is there a way that I can remove this drain or remove my exposure to it? If you can't remove it, can you reduce it? Can I reduce this drain? Or can I reduce my exposure to it? And then finally, if you can't remove it or reduce it, can you respond to it differently? Because often we respond to triggers in a way that we kind of knee-jerk react, and we tend to cause more suffering for ourselves if we react in a certain way. Whereas if we respond in a deliberate way that brings us peace, that enables us to decrease the suffering and have a more peaceful outcome. So again, think of that 3R rescue as a way to handle those triggers: remove it, reduce it, or respond to it differently. Sometimes we're just simply hijacked by stress and we get frozen or we don't know how to deal with it. So here's another phrase you can keep in mind, which is stop, drop, and roll. Professional firefighters will tell you, if your clothes catch on fire, what do? You stop, you drop to the ground, and you roll to put the fire out. Similar principle if you feel caught up in the fire or swirl of stress happening around you. You just stop, you mentally press pause. You drop, as in dropping in to that peace that is always within you. You might not have a lot of practice doing that, but it's just you allow yourself to settle. And as long as you need to, you might count to 10, you might take a few conscious breaths. So just drop in and get grounded, maybe feel the sensations in your feet and your hands. And here you can ask yourself some questions. You can ask yourself, what do I really need right now? What will most serve me? What's being called for to be tended to? And how do I want to respond? So stay in kind of that drop, settled place as long as you need to. And then roll with what's here. This gets back to being present and mindful. Roll with what's here externally to you, but also roll with acknowledging the feelings and emotions that are popping up within you. Roll with how you want to process that, maybe how you want to name it, and how you want to move on from that. In short, this helps you respond to a stressor in a way that you respond in this moment in a way that doesn't disrupt the next moment. Another question you might want to ask yourself when you're in that drop place is, how do I want, if I think about, if it's tomorrow, how do I want to respond now in a way that doesn't wreck tomorrow for me? Those are a few ways that you can think of asking yourself those questions. And then decide who and how you want to be in this stressful situation. How do you want to carry yourself? What do you want to be able to say tomorrow about how you carried yourself, for example? So being proactive in managing your stress might be a new idea for a lot of you. But you can get a lot of mileage out of doing that. So again, use the 3R rescue to plan to do that. Use the stop, drop, and roll when you're hijacked, and ultimately decide who and how you want to be in managing your stressors. One other kind of parting thought on this is, when you are kind of dropped in, remember that air changes words. So when you decide how you want to roll, think of the tone that you want to bring across. And that can also contribute to how you respond to your answer of deciding who and how you want to be. So I've given you a whole bunch of ideas, whether you're a leader or whether you're an employee, of how you can go about banishing burnout in your life. So to leave you with some parting thoughts, I invite you to, let's first of all acknowledge that burnout is real, and let's banish the burnout badge of honor. We don't need to plow through it. We don't need to muscle our way through it. While it's common, we don't need to make it the norm of operating. And let's work together to create an environment that models and enables well-being, where employees can succeed, be at their best, and feel safe in requesting help. And if you think you're heading towards burnout, press pause, assess your symptoms, look back at that slide with all the symptoms on it, identify what you think is causing the symptoms that you have, and then start brainstorming or get help on possible solutions. And I'll just leave you with, if you like these ideas today and you would like more support, I have a couple of suggestions for you. One, I have a gift on the homepage of my website, which is prioritywellness.com. The gift is a free report on 9 mistakes that prevent people from burnout proofing their lives. That's available, free to download. There's more ideas in there in addition to what I shared with you today. When you sign up for that, you'll also get my energizing monthly newsletter that has additional tips and future appearances and programs. If you would like help for you as an individual or for your team to run your days steady, energetic, and sane, feel free to reach out to me at my email, which is chris@prioritywellness.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn at the link below. So at this point, I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Chris. We do have a question. So this person is recognizing that it's ironic that those who are most likely feeling overwhelmed and burnout aren't really ones that might reach out and sign up for a webinar or look for information. So can you talk to us more about strategies you use as a coach that might help leaders to bring awareness to someone who might be exhibiting symptoms without diagnosing them or labeling them negatively or making them feel called out?
Yeah, you can just simply start by, frankly, being a human being and say, hey, I'm noticing this is going on for you. You don't seem like yourself, and I'm concerned for your well-being. Are you okay? And if someone says, yeah, I'm fine, a good follow-up is, how are you really? Mm-hmm. So really just be a human being and demonstrate that you're concerned about their well-being. You don't even have to use the term burnout. Just demonstrate that you're concerned about someone's well-being.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. I will leave it open for one more minute if we have any other questions, but thank you all for attending. Chris, I really like that 3R rescue, or just planning how to respond, because a lot of times we don't even really think about how we respond. So having that plan, I really liked that part. So thank you so much for your presentation. It was great. Thank you, all of you, on behalf of the Health Management Department of Health New England, and I'm Julia Wilkins in that department. This is our final and last webinar of this series. So thank you so much for attending, taking the time to improve your health and well-being by attending these webinars. We really appreciate you being here with us. As usual, you're going to get a survey email with a survey. Sorry, my computer is freezing. I'm trying to copy and paste that survey link in for you guys so that you can take it now if you want to. There we go. You also get a follow-up email with this link as well as a YouTube link. If you guys want to rewatch, as Chris mentioned, you can rewatch and take some of these tips and reiterate them in your mind. But thank you all so much. Our hope was that you found this series relevant and beneficial, and that you could walk away each week with tools or tips to help you increase your behavior change or in a positive way. So thank you so much for attending. We hope to see you at our next series. We will be sending out another email next week about evaluating the series as a whole to see if there's a need or a desire for another series, maybe a few months down the pipeline. So I hope you all stay well and have a great rest of your week, and we will talk soon. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.